Alright everybody, we're back. Another episode of The Process. And this time we're doing something a little bit different. We're focusing on a vehicle design. Sort of inspired from the movie and a screenshot, but I was really watching some movies this weekend over jets and military stuff. Pretty famous movies, you might be able to guess, but had some really good fun with them and just got inspired to make this image. So kind of doing a little bit of a different process this time, not just with the dark silhouette and a little bit of a grayscale, but this is how it's starting off. And normally through any of the sketching process, as you've seen through any of the videos, it really starts off really simple because we're trying to capture a simple base, right? The simple base is really about a 1, 2, 3 read, maybe a big, medium, and small shapes that are interesting as well for your eye to look at. And so notice that the horizon line is at a lower third. We'll go over some basic mechanics, but there's a horizon line at the lower third, and we're placing more of the focal point of the fuselage, not right in the middle, but a little bit offset, So that's one of the things that I want to talk about as we do composition is, we have a tendency to maybe want to make things very dynamic, but start off simple and maybe even get inspired by a photo or a screenshot of something that you just might want to do a study of. Oftentimes students ask me, hey, is it okay to do a study of a screenshot or a photo? And I'm like, absolutely. There's a difference between a photo, there's a difference between artwork that you create for a portfolio purpose, and there's a difference that you create artwork for practicing purpose, and practicing is all mileage and, use the best materials that you can. Anyway, going back here, I just wanted to kind of look at this shot right here. So I put it in a couple figures for scale, just to get a little bit of a sense of depth, foreground, middle ground, background. And one of the most important things is activating the shadow. Now the shadow really starts to show the direction of light. Although I'm not 100% sure what the light scenario is, at least I'm getting it down, I'm getting a little bit in there and sort of being able to see what the image is doing and how it'll react. Alright, so now that we got our basic sketch, let's move on to the sky. Now back to our other tutorials from episodes 1, 2, and 3, always start working with the sky first, and there's reasons for that. One of the main reasons that it is because it's such a large part of the canvas, right? Let's just be kind of analytical with it. It's a very large part of the canvas. Before we put in the vehicle, the sky was about 2/3 of the canvas. So yes, that is something that we want to determine first, and perhaps get even the larger pieces in the beginning. Now I might do an actual sky tutorial just about like how to do sky, different types of sky and clouds and weather systems. If that's something interesting to you, drop me a comment, let me know. And if you want to see anything else, let me know. And I guess it's a good time to ask for, if you like this video, hit that button and, subscribe. If you want to see more, let me know what you want to see. But adding in clouds are kind of simple because once we get a gradient going in the sky, notice that it's cool at the top, a little bit warmer down below. Now we're just going to follow that lighting scenario for the clouds, right? So more towards like a early morning rise type of scenario, where the sun is really close to the horizon line. So the bottom of the clouds might be more illuminated than the tops, right? So that's something that I think is kind of fun to pay attention to. And I'm adding in some silhouettes of maybe planets and moons and stuff just to give off that extraterrestrial alien vibe. For environment designers, the sky or the background, right, is a really key area. It's not just something that we want to put in, like a sky and clouds, but it's something that can tell us about the world. It can give us a bigger sense of the things that we're not seeing. So the background can really help with scale, where we're located, the sensibilities of the world. And then once we get into the midground and foreground, that's actually a lot of narrative and camera setting, So the midground where the ship is, with the characters around it, there's a ship right there, it's a focal point, there's characters around it, they're probably doing something to the ship, like preparing or fueling or putting on some extra weapons or something. Now, what's kind of interesting about that is that the foreground person isn't a part of the action, but a more of a camera set perspective part of it. You know, it makes us feel like we're part of the action. If that person wasn't there, it'd be a lot more open. Okay, so different sensations, right? All right, let's look at this. This is where I'm starting to texture in the vehicle, right? I'll use a photo of a helicopter just to get a sense of like the metal textured feel, and I'm just plastering all over this thing, you know. As you saw the photo, as I laid onto the shape, the internal design starts to warp and change as the photos become laid in. You know, some of these darker accents look like vents or intake inlets or some sort of functional design element. So just like in other episodes where I did the sci-fi video, I did a similar process to like a sci-fi building. If you want to check that out, look at our earlier episodes. But I'm doing the same process. You know, whether it's a vehicle or a building, I want to more or less approach it the same way. So first thing is first, I textured it up. Now what I'm doing is I'm giving it some form. You know, this shape is the focal point. Now, focal points usually get more attention, and the audience eye tends to look at it longer. So it's a good idea to, you know, give it that extra love of, you know, form and volume lighting, a little bit more attention to the subtleties and just the geometry of things. Now I'm just doing a light side, shadow side. Just like everything before, the bottom of the ship is getting a little bit more light. You know, there's a just kind of the lighting scenario that we're working with here is in a way that there's a lot of bounce light, there's a lot of warm bounce light coming up underneath these objects. So that's something I want to kind of think about. Now I'm working on the ship, and I'll be honest, it was a little bit of a challenge to get this ship designed. You know, I'm normally not a ship designer or a vehicle designer, so this is a bit out of my comfort zone. Something fun to do, yes. Was it challenging? Absolutely. But as a professional concept designer, you get asked to do all sorts of things. You get asked to do things that are in your comfort zone as well as outside of your comfort zone. And I think that's important to realize, is that we get asked to do all sorts of things. So it's good to have just general practice of doing things that are, you know, comfortable and not comfortable. All right, so back to the ship here. You know, because I'm kind of designing it in this viewpoint, it's a little bit more challenging, but I'm experimenting, you know, and that's something that I want to put out there right now to everybody watching, is that this piece took a little bit of time to develop, right? We sketched it out, we did a little bit of value study, we added in some color, some scale, and now it's time to focus on the main meat of this dish, you know. And everything else, the sky, the ground, the people, went by pretty quickly. And I don't want to use that same speed when it comes to the vehicle, because it's meant to slow down. It's meant to be looked at slower. So one of the good things about this process is that knowing where to go fast and knowing where to go slow, it actually allows you to be very efficient. You know, earlier days I remember going fast in this part because I just thought I needed to paint quickly, or my hand needed to move really fast all the time. What I realized later is going slower in the slow parts allows for better efficiency. You know, going fast in the fast parts is good, and slowing down where we need to slow down. Where do we need to slow down, everyone? Maybe just use your focal point as your first area to focus on, right? No pun intended. All right, now, okay, so at this point, I'm going back and forth from molding the volume to creating the design. Okay, molding the volume means getting the 3D shape. So if there's any people that do 3D out there, this might be a little bit more straightforward, but you know, we're just working on the shape as a volume. And then the design, these elements that are sitting on top, these vents, cut lines, these additional smaller shapes and volumes that sit on top of the fuselage. Those are more design based, you know. So I'm going back and forth to designing and volumizing, you know, and this is a way for me to experiment. I still do not know exactly what the ship is going to look like in the front, you know. So this is me just experimenting. I'm using photos to kind of find a rhythm. You could see me struggling a little bit here with some perspective, and I'm just like, how do I figure this out, right? And so my normal thought process is I'm gonna use some photos. I'm gonna be a bit abstract, see what I can find, okay? And I'm gonna start to think about just that whole process, you know? So I'm starting to put this other helicopter image in here, and I see the front of it, and I'm like, whoa, that looks kind of interesting. It looks like some windows or some cool, I don't know, shapes or something like that on there. So I started to push this direction a little bit, okay? I see that the dark side of the ship. There's like a window. There's like a lighter window shape that's popping out, right? And I saw it. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Let me see if I could go down. Let me see if I can get off this exit, you know, from the freeway basically, and see what this exit has for me in terms of entertainment, you know? I don't know if that analogy makes sense, but I just want to explore this rabbit hole. Okay, now exploring this rabbit hole means that I have to commit to designing it. I have to commit to exploring it further, but also I have to be mindful of if it's not going the right way, I should start to listen to my gut, develop this sense of artist intuition, and start to believe in my own gut, you know? So I'm just going down the rabbit hole. I'm trying to do what I think looks right, what might look cool. I'm like, looking at this thing in the little thumbnail navigator window, and I'm like, I don't know if I like it. I don't know if I like it. So that's attempt number 2 or 3, or I think, to try and figure out what the front of this looks like, right? And then I remembered, I'm like, wait, what was I trying to do? I was inspired by jets. Okay, well, why am I using all this helicopter reference? And I started to kind of think about my process a little bit, right? Because anytime I'm stuck, anytime you're stuck, anytime you have a piece that's not necessarily going in the direction and sort of the flow is off, like your flow state, that means for me, I gotta go back and examine my basic recipe. You know, I have like a airplane shape and I'm trying to do like a helicopter textures. It's just not necessarily working for me. So what's the plan? Well, as you can see here, I'm still trying to push that direction, and I think pretty soon I'm going to realize that I don't like it. So at this point, let me just talk about what's kind of going through my head here is, you know, I'm trying to be pretty open. I'm trying to understand like what are some of the options that I can explore here, and I've realized that all these shapes in here, they're just not working for me. Okay, and I'm trying to cut into the windows. I'm trying to make the shapes feel a little bit more, I don't know, interesting or cool. I'm just like, wow, this is not working. So let me go back. Let me stop on the designing, right, and let me go back to volume. And let me just see what happens. Okay. So as one thing that I want to explain is, if you ever get stuck on something, move on to some other part and come back to it, you know. I tried 1, 2, 3 swings at the ship and it just wasn't going. You know, it developed further. There's a little bit more, you know, refinement to the shape or the silhouette, and maybe a little bit more to the interior design. But at this point I'm like, okay, let me just not get frustrated and let me work on the ground. You know, that's another big part of the composition, so might as well just knock that out. Did a really quick twinning of a texture, slammed it on the ground, distorted it all the way out to a very dynamic kind of shape, so that we just see a small portion of it, really distorted, really foreshortened. It's pretty cool ground plane. All right. Now, as I filled that in, I feel like I have a little bit more confidence, right, how to build it up. So I'm just gonna go back into carving basic shapes and volumes. I was thinking, okay, I'm getting too focused on the details. I feel like I'm drawing an eyeball on a you know, on a head, on a face. right? I should be focusing on, okay, let's chisel out the eye sockets, the nose, the mouth, not focus on like a nostril at this time, right? So here I am. Let me just add in a little bit more surfacing. Now it's kind of crazy that once we painted in a little bit of that light reflection, the front of that ship now becomes a point. Now that's kind of the crazy thing about concept, or not concept design, but illustration actually, right? Is that with these subtle gestural changes inside of the shape, it completely evolves what the shape looks like. It's really, really cool, you know? So now the shape kind of looks more like a mid-World War, after World War II, early Vietnam War, like jet, you know, something like that, where they kind of figured out like jet propulsion a lot more in military. Kind of reminds me of that vibe. Any of you history buffs out there? Any of you like military history, study World War II, any of that stuff? Drop a line, you know. It's definitely stuff I love to look at. Becomes a huge inspiration source of mine for like personal work and stuff. What do you look at for personal work? I'm so curious. Or what is your personal work lately? You know, drop me a line, let me know. All right, so carving out, carving out. Now the shapes, see, even when we do buildings and trees and a mountain, once we import some textures into the silhouette, we start to soon realize that the silhouette could use some refining, right? It could use some little adjusting here and there. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to do here. Now I remember back when I was young, I used to have this military jet book, and the book had these jets, and it had displayed all their weapons, all their bullets, all their missiles, all their bombs, and it was all displayed like in front of the ship, or in front of the airplane, and it was the coolest thing. I always remember being like so infatuated with like gear, with like military gear and weaponry and art, like items that they would have, accessories. I thought it was so cool. So that's why I started painting all this stuff. It's like, oh man, imagine if I could get that same sensation of, oh cool, look at all that stuff, right? And so that's where I'm going into this sketch mode, just a dark sketch, and I tend to do this without having too much commitment, right? I'm just painting in some shapes and keeping the canvas very small just to see what it does, and these little things are more like set dressers. I'm adding them in so that we can see where they go. Does it impact the composition in a good way? If it does not, then I want to take it off. So I have a rabbit hole here that I'm going to experiment with. We've put in some, we've placed some figures with some photo. And again, I'm just using this as an example of some of the exercises of how to get efficient, These characters are great placeholders. They're a great way to get the initial impact of the scene more developed. And I have that pilot about to enter in a ship through through some sort of like a mobile ladder device or something. So let's see here. Let's see what we could do. Let's see what we can create here with this. Now, most of the time, whenever there's a rabbit hole like this, initially there wasn't in the sketch a whole bunch of equipment. So I'm kind of experimenting, right? So always remember, whenever we're doing a rabbit hole experiment like this, it could change. We're adding something to it that wasn't initially in the process, right? It wasn't in the thought. So could it make it better? Yes, absolutely. But could it make it worse? That's also a possibility. And that's the thing about a rabbit hole, is we got to know that it could have either effect. So what's my, recommendation or advice on that? Explore. Absolutely explore. But give yourself a little bit of a limit so that you're not exploring too far. Give yourself a little bit of a limit so that at a certain point you should be analyzing it to see if you should keep it. Sometimes it's a little hard to know when that time is, So that comes through mileage. That definitely comes through practice. All right, so trying to make this ladder, this device feel contextually like it matches the rest of the environment. It feels like it's a similar bit of technology. I keep working on this thing, and you know, so far it's looking okay, but we'll see. We'll just keep going. Getting them a little meticulous, and anytime it's like, and I believe I've talked about it before in other videos maybe, but anytime I get really into the small parts, like my pen brush size is getting really small, and I'm kind of getting into small details, especially at this point, I know I'm jumping ahead of myself, you know, because there's so much still to establish and get in there, you know, there's still much more. So that's the point where we're now. Have a little bit of a sunset there, got the characters going, got the ship. It seems like we have our major, you know, 1, 2, 3 elements in here, okay? And once we have most of these elements, then it's time to paint, light, do shadows, atmosphere, reflected light, pop some colors, pop some interest points. So interest points are things like this, like a little bit of reflection on his helmet visor, you know, bring slight more attention or visual complexity to a certain area. Now, playing with color is also another area that's very fun to do, and so I like to play around with color on top of everything, you know, basically meaning that I want to establish all the painting, but color saturation and certain hue shifts I think I could do at the very end. And people might have a different working process than that, so you know, take this tutorial with a grain of salt. I mean, it's the way that works for me, and it's the way that you know, I've been taught through various instructors, and so there are always different ways to do this. Color dodge layer. I'm trying to pop that nose, you know, try to get that nose of the ship to kind of come towards us a little bit more, be a little bit more volumetric. So hitting it with that color dodge, allowing it to have a little bit more light dark contrast, it pops it forward. You see, when I turn it off, it's kind of more subdued. Right? You still see the shape and volume, doesn't look too bad, but it could definitely be stronger. Now as I zoom in here, you can see sort of the roughness of the brush strokes. And it's a good thing that you guys could see all that, because in this initial phase, it's just about laying things in. We are basically volumizing everything. A little bit of details, cockpits, some details that might be a little bit smaller as well can also be very important here, you know. So some of the tertiary elements, again, we've got a lot of the big medium shapes in here, the 1s and the 2s. So it's a good time. It's a good time to focus on the 3s now. The smaller elements, the set dressing elements that I kind of talk about. Looks like we're moving along pretty good. This is a smudge brush. The smudge brush allows me to smoothen out some of the brush strokes, some of the very textural brush strokes that you would see. This is a fun brush to use. Again, just moving around the canvas, preparing, getting things aligned, checking perspective also, looking at little details, you know. The photo of the jet on the upper left is for me to look at the surface outer silhouette. You know, what are some of these small details that we can pick up on that just help with scale, help communicate design, like little winglets and cut lines and just interesting element points. So yes, just doing some cut lines. These really actually help a ton when they sit on top of that kind of surface of the fuselage, right? The cut lines become very apparent and they really help shape the volume, especially if we're following the volume form, right? So make sure that, you know, if you're doing this process, because cut lines can be used on a device, a vehicle, it could be on a robot. Like, these really help out a lot. So find the accurate, you know, appropriate cut lines that might help show the volume changes the most, or the volume, just the sense of volume the most. Now, even though this painting started off with a lot of photo, it's soon becoming to feel very hand applied by hand. And that's a feel that I personally like, you know, the way that a painting feels, where it feels like it's more human made, you know, more textured, has imperfections, right? You could see the application of some of these differences. And so I like that, you know. What do you guys like? There's a whole different type of flavor out there for all different types of artists, and you know what? There's no one correct look. So some people might like very painterly, some people might like super photoreal or blender look. What do you like? Would love to know. Put on some little wheels here. So in this rabbit hole is probably one of the more time invested rabbit holes that we're seeing in this painting, right? And we're adding in all these other things because I think it's working so far. As it keeps working, we just want to make sure that we keep going, right? And so making sure that we do that is pretty key. Now I was looking at this rabbit hole, we went down pretty far. I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, all right, how's it working? You know, we're still adding in some small tertiary shapes to the ship. Nothing really major, nothing that's going to change the design too much. All these tertiary shapes just sit on top, and they don't really do a whole lot to changing the initial design direction, right? Even these little antennas and whatever they're just for extra decoration. I'll put a little weapon up in the front. Couple weapons. Machine guns or something. Alright. Now, just as any other painting goes, as we get to a point where we're pretty comfortable with the development, okay? I'm working on some smaller details on the ship. There's a whole other list of things to go through beyond just the ship, right? There's characters, there's other details, there's you know, things in the background, things on the ground. So as we move forward with this, I just want to remember that there's a whole other list of things that we have to accomplish, right? There's a whole lot. So I just want to be mindful that I keep going, that I keep you know, moving my attention around and still keep developing. I don't know what happened there. I sometimes just get lost in my own layers. I thought I had that on its own layer, but I guess I didn't. So I'll just do a copy merge, move it over to the other side of the ship, and make it look like it's on the other side of the fuselage there. There we go. Alright, so this is part of the Go Flight series. So I don't know if you saw that, but I took a circle marquee, copied the front of the fuselage because I guess the bombs that are on the side of the wings, they have the same shape, right? So I just kind of took that, painting in some reflection into the wing itself. Boom, boom, boom. Get another bomb over there. And I like how it adds to the silhouette. I really enjoy how those two shapes, those two like bomb elements on the ship, it changes so much, you know? It adds so much more. And I'm pretty sure I got influenced by the photo that was right behind us, like right there. We have to know as artists, oh my gosh, if we look at something, it can like change everything just by us looking at a photo or interesting, you know, even with our eyes from a movie, it could completely be like, oh my god, I'm inspired by that now. I'm gonna change everything. If you've ever experienced that, like, it's pretty funny. But it's hard to do art and design when we're always changing our minds, right? So one thing is for certain is it's okay to be inspired, but learn how to prioritize your inspiration. We don't have to always have it, take over, so to speak. So a little bit more lights, I'm working on that. I like to use white dots as like the source of a light bulb, and then I use color screen layer with a very saturated color to give the color of the bulb, right? So most light bulbs are like white in the inside. When you look at it, it's just the gradated glow that shows the temperature. All right, so guess what? I took out the ladder. I took it out, and I just thought it felt too much going on now. Right side, left side, it felt too sandwiched. And so now is where I completed the image. I've started to do a little bit more compression and think about the background, and I added in a little bit more details for some of the characters on the ground and a little bit more in the sky as well. So here's what a finished product looks like, as well as one of the color shifts, a palette shift option that I often like to create during this process as well. So thanks for joining me, everybody. It was a fun time to paint with y'all. Take a look at the tutorial, at the other tutorials that I have. Please drop me a line. Let me know if you'd like to see anything else. I'm thinking about other materials and other things to paint. And so hope to see you guys on the next one. Thanks for joining. Take care.